1, minus 2, minus 2, minus 3, minus 1, and then skip 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4. And we talked about the ides being light. So we should know a nitrite, a sulfide, a chloride. Is that right? Now, we're going to memorize a few more polyatomic ions. All right? I'm going to rewrite the O, no, so, co, po, clone, minus 1, minus 1, minus 2, minus 2, minus 3, minus 1, plus 1, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4. All right? So in this unit, you will only get tested on these and the ides. Is that right? But the next unit, you may have to know more. We know that ClO2 minus 1, this is chlorate. And what is this? Chloride. All right? Supposing you decrease by 1 more. Are you with me? You make it ClO minus 1. Yes. It's called a hypochlorite. If you decrease 1 more, what is that called? Hypo, like you have hypoglycemia. Right? Very, very small amount of oxygen. Are you with me? The lowest possible. Are you with me? That's called a hypochlorite. Now, supposing you increase 1 more oxygen. It's not hyper, it's not hyper, it's called perchlorate. That name is slightly different. Are you with me? So 1 less than the chloride, this is an ide. This is a hypochlorite. That's a chlorate. And that is a perchlorate. Do you understand? Now, once we know the chlorides isn't fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine, do they belong in group 17?
Yeah.
Right? They're all in group 17. So if you know chlorate, which is ClO3, are you with me? You don't have to memorize bromate. What is bromate going to be? BrO3. What is iodate going to be? IO3. What is fluorate going to be? FO3 minus 1. Instead of chlorate, you just replace the chlorine with the bromine. Does that make sense? Chlorate, bromine. Very similar. Was that hard? Do you understand this?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that easy to learn?
Maybe. Not sure.
Miranda, you have a question? What is it? Where did you come up with these elements? Or isn't chlorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine in the same group? So these are polyatomics that exist in nature, Miranda. I didn't come up with them. So there exists a chlorate, there also exists a bromate, or an iodate, or a fluorate. Now, if I know chloride, then I know bromide or iodide. They are the same. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So if you go to that list that you have to memorize, let's see what all you know thus far. You know ammonium, you know nitrite, nitrate, hydroxide, hypochlorite, chloride, chlorate, perchlorate, you know bromate, you know iodate, You know periodate, acetate, carbonate, sulfate, sulfide, and phosphate. Is that right? You know a whole lot of them. Yes or no? Do you know all these? Oscar, you have a question? Why don't you use it? That is radioactive, hardly exists in nature for a couple of seconds. We don't know of any compounds. If in theory it is, then we know what it is. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, let's go back. You know phosphate. Yes or no?
Always.
Phosphate, you memorize. Where is arsenic on the periodic table? Right underneath phosphorus. So if I need to write arsenate, how will I write arsenate? ASO4 -3. That's not bad. Is that right? If I know phosphate, I know arsenate. Are we good?
Sure.
Now, let's learn something with including hydrogen. When we include hydrogen, okay? So hydrogen is always a +1. Hydrogen, when it's in a polyatomic ion, it gives 1 electron. Does that make sense? Now, supposing you combine H plus with CO3 -2. What do the two of them become? They become HCO3. The oxygen number does not change. But what happens to the +1 and the -2? The charge becomes a -1. This compound is called hydrogen carbonate. When you include a hydrogen with a polyatomic ion, the charge will drop 1. Back in the days, they used to call it bicarbonate. Nowadays, we label it hydrogen carbonate. We don't call it bicarbonate anymore.
It's not 2 carbon.
Yeah, it's not 2 carbon. All right? We call it hydrogen carbonate. Now, similarly, if you mix this with sulfate, what will that become? It becomes hydrogen sulfate. Is that easy to remember? Once I know sulfate, I can write hydrogen sulfate. If I know carbonate, I know to write hydrogen carbonate. Yes or no?
Yes.
Similarly, if I know phosphate, what will that become? It will become hydrogen phosphate. Right? That is hydrogen phosphate. But since it's a -3, we can add one more hydrogen to the hydrogen phosphate. What will that become?
Dihydrogen phosphate.
Dihydrogen phosphate. What is that? That is a dihydrogen phosphate. Was that easy?
Yes.
Once you know carbonate, sulfate, or phosphate, can you get the hydrogen carbonate, hydrogen sulfate, hydrogen or dihydrogen phosphate? Yes, Nadia. So this is a -2, right? That's a +1. It becomes a 2 now. And the plus has become a -1. Yes, Sarah. -1, you can continue to add hydrogen. Yes, Tanaya. When you add hydrogen to a polyatomic ion. All these are just polyatomic ions, right? So let's go back to that list and see whether we had to memorize anything new. No, not really. All I needed to know was chloride and perchlorate. Is that right? Those are the only two new additions. And then everything else is like improvising that. Is that right? So now I know hydrogen carbonate, I know hydrogen phosphate, dihydrogen phosphate, I know arsenate. Okay, I know hydrogen sulfate. So which are the odd ones now?
Cyanide.
All right, thiosulfate, peroxide, and cyanide. Peroxide. You add one more oxygen, like perchlorate. Didn't you add one more oxygen to chlorate and it became perchlorate? Yes?
Yes.
To oxygen, you add one more oxygen. What does it become? Peroxide. Because it was oxide, it's still a peroxide. Right? So to chlorate, you add one more oxygen, it becomes what? Perchlorate. To oxygen, you add one more oxygen, what does it become?
Peroxide.
Peroxide. Two oxygens, right? Oxygen itself is a -2.
Yeah.
Peroxide is O2 -2.
Oh.
Right?
Hydrogen peroxide.
The peroxide is the polyatomic in
The
hydrogen peroxide.
Just moments.
All right? Now, thio is also not that difficult. Right? You have sulfate. Are you with me?
Yes.
So, instead of having an oxygen, how many oxygens do we have?
4.
4. Is that right? If you replace one of the oxygens, replace an oxygen with sulfur. What are you replacing the oxygen with? Sulfur. So what does the formula become? S2, because one of the oxygen has now become a sulfur. How many oxygens are left? 3 minus 2, sulfate will become a thiosulfate. Anytime oxygen is replaced with sulfur, the group starts with the word thio. Are you with me?
I'm very tired.
So those two are exceptions. Cyanide you just have to memorize, just as you memorized acetate. Are we good? The remaining polyatomic ions are not that difficult to memorize. Are we good? Once you know one, then you know the